Good afternoon. For those of you who are here to hear Charlie Miner, the ASPPPO Board President, speak, I must tell you that Charlie is out of town, but as you know, when you miss a meeting you're supposed to be at, please do not worry, because we've made sure that all the refreshments will be charged to Charlie's personal account for today, and we will be eating. My name is Michael Tucker, and I have the privilege of serving as your Vice President on the ASPPPO Board. As I looked at the crowd, it reminded me of a story I used to use when I did public speaking years ago. Many times I would ask people if they had ever heard of Adlai Stevenson, and many times there was just blank looks of people who did not know that Adlai Stevenson was the Democratic nominee for president in 1960. Why I like to think about that right now is that he spoke at Harvard University on the campaign trail, and before he began his presentation, he started with these words: "I am here to speak, and you are here to listen. It is my hope we finish at the same time." That having been said, I'd like to officially call to order the 2016 ASPPPO Annual Membership Meeting, and to do so, to begin our meeting, I'd like to call on Dan Westerback, the Secretary of the ASPPPO Board, to verify that we do have a quorum. Thank you, sir. Our second order of business is to approve the minutes from our May 8th, 2015 meeting. Those minutes were included in your annual report that was mailed out to you last week. I think most people have received those. If you have not, a copy of the annual reports are up front. So the chair is now open to a motion to adopt and approve the minutes of the May 8th, 2015 meeting. Do I hear any discussion? Having heard no discussion, that vote will pass and those minutes will be approved. In compliance with the ASPPPO bylaws, we are obligated to announce the names of the 2016 nominating committee for the ASPPPO Board at this meeting. Chairing this year's nominating committee will be Mr. Barry Barth. Serving with Barry will be Mr. Richard Spear and Mr. Dan Westerback. Serving on a board takes time. Serving on this board is no exception. Last year, Mike Jordan and Joe Kernan chose not to seek re-election to the ASPPPO Board. Both Mike and Joe spent considerable time above and beyond the call of duty in their service for 3 years. Mike's input on legal issues for ASPPPO spoke greatly to the impact that we had on several legal issues last year. Joe Kernan's involvement with the Sea-Pine Circle and the town's Circle to Circle provided us a steady flow of information from the town, and at the same time offered us good representation to the town. I have not seen either Mike or Joe here today. If they are, I'd like for them to stand. If not, I'd like to give them a round of applause for their time and effort. While their ASPPPO service has ended, ours has not. And at this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you your 2016 ASPPPO Board and their committee chairs. I would ask my colleagues to stand when I call their names. Serving their first year of a 3-year term, Mr. Barry Barth, who will be chairman of the nominating committee, Mr. David Borghese, who begins his first year of his second term, and Ms. Beverly Searle, co-chairman of the short-term rental committee. Beverly is in Miami with some health issues, looking at some issues with her eyes, and is not able to be here. Serving their second year of a 3-year term are Mr. James Richardson, JR, who is the ARB liaison. JR had some hip problems over the weekend, and he is not here. Something about aging that just falls into line, doesn't it? Mr. Richard Spear, board treasurer, and Mr. Dan Westerback, board secretary. And serving their third year of a 3-year term are Mr. Mark Griffith, traffic, Mr. Charlie Miner, please do not stand, Charlie, no one will know you're doing it, board president, and myself, Michael Tucker, Board Vice President. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your 2016 ASPPPO Board. ASPPPO has a very unique position inside the gates of Sea Pines. Unlike CSA, we are a completely voluntary organization totally dedicated to the concerns of the residential property owners. I think it's important that everyone understands that this function is the core responsibility of the organization. The board's discussions, their actions are intended to ensure that the residential property owners' voices are heard. Now, when I talk about that, about the voices being heard, that does not guarantee, however, that each individual property owner's position will be acted upon to their satisfaction. But what it does mean is that the ASPPPO Board will listen, the ASPPPO Board will consider, the ASPPPO Board will discuss, and the ASPPPO Board will make decisions based on what that board believes to be in the best interest of the majority of residential property owners. Sometimes that is a difficult task, but it is our feeling that by focusing on issues that impact the majority, we build a better community for everyone. While separate, ASPPPO works closely and cooperatively with CSA on many common issues concerning Sea Pines. Like the CSA Board, we too are seeking better means for improving the communications between the property owners and the board. One of our means for doing that is having either Charlie or myself, and sometimes both of us, attend all the POA presidents' meetings that Dan Westerback chairs. Likewise, Charlie and I have spoken at various neighborhood POA meetings and will continue to do so when asked, as well as any other ASPPPO board member will do so when asked. We're meeting individually with all the POA presidents right now to map out where each POA location is within the confines of Sea Pines. We hope that this mapping effort will allow us to identify neighborhoods that do not have local representation. We could form local POAs in those areas as another way of adding additional lines of communication both from us to the property owners and from the property owners back to us. Because all of us are concerned about traffic and gate issues, we're working with CSA's Gate Configuration Committee to find viable solutions to a long-standing and complex question. That having been said, we must realize that there is no easy answer to this issue, because if there were, it would have been implemented long ago. In addition to traffic and gate concerns, we're also working to see to it that properties and guests maintain our standards. That is done through the Joint Short-Term Rental Task Force and the utilization of our Land Use Monitor. Last year, your ASPPPO Board adopted specific guidelines dealing with under-maintained or blighted properties. Now, that having been said, we hope that you understand that the Sea Pines Covenants does not allow for any assessment of fines, which greatly restricts our enforcement capabilities. To truly enforce the maintenance of our homes, the appearance of our community, and the integrity of Sea Pines, we will have to pursue a covenant change that would need to be adopted by us, the property owners. ASPPPO also supports the CSA's long-range strategic plans. Plans designed to address current and future maintenance issues, as well as developing new enhancements to better our quality of life inside the gates. Additionally, we're working with the resort as they plan their future to be sure your interests are properly considered. As many of you know, ASPPPO has been in discussions with the resort now for almost a year on several very important issues. Those discussions have been ongoing without an agreement to date. Major issues include resort's hotel expansion plans, golf tee times, the resort's annual assessment, and transfer of certain forest preserve property. These are all complex, covenant-related questions which are important to us, the residential property owners. ASPPPO continues to work for an equitable solution for both property owners and the resort, because we recognize that all of us live here today, and when this negotiation is over, we will all share the common future here tomorrow. Charlie Miner has written a general letter to the ASPPPO membership summarizing the current status of these discussions. His letter has been posted on the ASPPPO website, and if you have not read it, I encourage you to go and read. We also have copies of Charlie's letter here at the desk that you can pick up when you leave. Ladies and gentlemen, ASPPPO is your organization just as it is mine. It's the organization solely dedicated to represent us, the property owners, inside Sea Pines. We encourage your input. We encourage your participation. We encourage your communications as we work together in making Sea Pines the place to be now and the place to be in years to come. Later this year in November, we'll be holding community elections for both the ASPPPO and CSA boards. Because ASPPPO maintains an open nominating process, any ASPPPO member in good standing can become a candidate and run for the ASPPPO board. Hopefully, your attention span ended because my notes have ended and we ended at the same time. Thank you for your attention. Let me turn it over to Board Treasurer Rich Spear, and then I'll come back for an adjournment motion. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Mark, I saw you coming up. If you want to do the financials, you're more than... This is the exciting part of the presentation. Let's see if we can get to it. This is as big as we could make it and fit on the screen, but let me focus on the high points. Our total revenues this year, in 2015 fiscal year, were $133,265. That compares to $136,153 last year. Major differences in our membership. Remember, the $35 fee that you pay goes to our membership, and our membership has been dropping by 40 or 50 a year. And I'll talk about that at the end because I think it's an extremely important investment for all of us as property owners. In terms of our major expense items, I'll just focus on the major items for this year. We pay a service fee to CSA for support that they provide. Land use monitor, which has become a very critical resource. We pay for that individual to check the properties and maintain them. And while we are concerned about under-maintained properties, by and large, the majority of our residents do comply when they are asked to. But we do have a handful of people that need to be reminded more directly. And that is one of the covenant conversations that I think you heard referenced earlier. And the next one that comes down that's material really is legal fees. Legal fees this past year rose from about $4,000 to $106,000. All of that is related to the conversations we have ongoing with the resort and with understanding particular covenants that aren't necessarily resort-based, but that are important for us as CSA, in dealing with CSA and dealing with resort. But there are over 1,100 pages of covenant documents. So when somebody starts to talk about looking at the covenants, it's a massive effort to go through them. And there are a number of issues that we're working through, as we said, with the resort, and that's part of what drives it. We hold significant reserves for just this kind of purpose. When we need to be able to spend money to understand our rights and protect them, we can do it. We have the wherewithal to do that. If you take a look at our next major item down there, printing postage and proxies, and of course, a significant amount of money going to our meeting. I think most of that is alcohol, I understand.
It's going to Charlie.
Going to Charlie. Oh, Charlie's fishing trip. Oh, Charlie's going to pay for that, so that really will be melted down. No, but it's overall expenses around $206,000, up from $111,000. All of that really primarily in the legal expense area. As you look at our portfolio, we get bond premium expenses, and then we're forced to mark to market. The combination of that, basically we had $6,000 worth of expense and a loss of around $3,700 on the portfolio as of the market. So overall loss for the year, and net impact on our assets, if you will, of $83,000 as you see there. compared to 22,000 positive last year. To put that in context, one of the issues we dealt with last year is do we have too much in reserve, and should we look at dividending that back out or paying that back out for things that we want to see done? In hindsight, it's turned out to be very prudent for us to have kept that reserve. Next slide. If you look at our balance sheet right now, we have assets around $531,000, mostly in the investment accounts at fair market value, and compared to about $50,000 from last year, which was $582,000. Still very liquid. In our liabilities, we have about $118,000 worth of liabilities. Deferred revenue and dues is really coming from our fees that are you pay, and then we amortize those over the 12 months, and just general clearing and clearing account and CSA payables that we have going on. Under net assets, we started the period with around $510,000. We've reduced that by about a little over 100, so we're at about a little less than 100, excuse me. $412,000 in net assets, all predominantly in our investment portfolio. And that compares to about $490,000 last year, so we're down about $80,000. And all of that, again, is attributable to the investments we're making in the legal efforts we have going on. So overall, we still have a net worth of around $530,000, down about $50,000 or so net from last year. Next slide. Our budget for this year is similar. We're projecting membership dues to continue to decline slightly or hold. We're hoping to turn that around, do some marketing on that. We have $115,000 and 16,000 round numbers in our operating revenue for the year. We expect to spend about $211,000. The dominating, our land use monitor, is around $27,000. He's the individual, as you know, that goes around and looks at the properties for us when we have a complaint or need to. Our insurance is actually pretty good at around $14,000. We are working more on membership solicitation. See a slide at the end talking a little bit about that. And postage and printing adds about another $28,000, all part of our communications effort. In general, those expenses are rising as we seek to communicate more clearly and more frequently, whether it's through the internet or in written hard copy form. Public relations activities and legal expense, we expect that to drop to about $75,000, I think, as we're able to reach some resolution on the issues we have pending. And then normal operating business kind of expenses of around $9,500. And when we clean up a property and when we get paid for by the covenants, we're usually about $1,000 or $1,800 in expense, or next year we expect to collect some money from this year, so we have it as really a contra expense at this point. Interest income around $11,000. Amortization, again, the premiums that we're having around $3,800, and unrealized gains or losses on the investment portfolio. So total other income around $10,000. So we're looking for a net bottom line of about $86,000 negative next year. Next slide. Our balance sheet, first quarter actual in terms of our income and expense, pretty much against our budget. We came in a little better on $105,000 extra, came in a little under, on membership fees, came in a little better on investment income, and other income was pretty much on target, other revenue. So about $8,000 behind our bogey, most of that coming from membership fees. Now that generally will improve a little bit in the second quarter as some members defer paying until then, but overall that's where we are. Our total expenses for the quarter around $35,000. That compared to a budget of around $78,000. We're really, in terms of legal expenses, significantly lower than we expected for the first quarter, and that's due to completing some work that we had before, and it's more of a timing issue of what will start up in legal expense. The rest of the fees are pretty much in line. Low disk space, as you're running out of disk. Recommend memory. Okay. Click here for some free updates. $35,000 in expenses for the quarter compared to about $77,000 budgeted. But as I said, that's mostly timing. And in terms of other income, we budgeted about $1,576. We basically had a wash in gains and losses on the portfolio, market to markets. So around $71,000 net decrease. Net increase in revenues for the quarter, up, and $33,000 was what we budgeted. Again, better because expenses that we were expecting were not, and again, better because, of course, this is the quarter in which we get the most coming in from our membership dues. Next slide. Next slide. I can tap dance up here for a little while, but let's see. Balance sheet is basically total assets around 490,000, liabilities are around 5,700, very little, just payables. Again, our portfolio, overall net increase in assets around 483. That'll be kept liquid until we see how this works out in terms of timing. When we decide we can, we will take and invest that as we have done before. But overall, our net assets liabilities at the end of the year, end of the quarter, 490 compared to 531 last year, about a $41,000 difference. Next. This is the last slide we have in the financial section, trying to finish this on time. Over the last 3 years, we have gradually seen the number of members, particularly this year in 15, basically drop. 1,242 of our resident owners are not members. 3,800 are. There's been a gradual erosion for any number of potential reasons, but for $35 a year, this is probably the best investment you can make. I have to say that when I joined the board, I wasn't sure of the role of ASPPPO versus CSA. I will tell you that ASPPPO is critical to residential property owners. It is critical to protect your rights because that's its sole function. It has no other function. And in doing that, it's important to have all of you participate. We will do fine with our financials now, but we really would like to penetrate that 1,242 members that are not currently members. So if you have a friend or a neighbor who's not a member, for $35, this is the cheapest club you can join to protect a very valuable asset for you. I would also make one comment. I serve with the group that's dealing with the resort. There are a number of issues that both parties are in complete agreement on. There's a few issues in which there's some differences of opinion. But a number of those things there's agreement on are things that would strengthen our position as a resort in terms of being able to assess penalties or others for property owners and other sorts of things. So there's a number of other valuable things that are wrapped up in this besides just the conversation and issues around the resort. With that, let me turn it back over to you, Mark. Michael, sorry? Charlie. Charlie's twin brother by another mother.
Thank you, Rich. I'm not sure. We will hold at the end of the ASPPPO session and then slide over to Mark for the CSA session. And then at the end of Mark's presentation on CSA, we will entertain question and answers for both organizations. So that having been said, the floor is open for a motion to adjourn. Do I hear one?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion? I'm sure there will be limited. If not, motion passes. Aye? Aye. Thank you all.
Thanks, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. I am your CSA Board Chairman, and I call order the annual meeting of the Community Service Administration this May 9th of 2016. First order of business, Carolyn, would you confirm that we have a quorum either in person or by proxy?
Yes, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. First order of business is the approval of our meeting minutes of May 8th, 2015. Does anybody have any comments or additions? Those minutes were posted in our annual report and on our website. Seeing none, may I have a motion to accept and approve those minutes? A second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. One of my many duties includes appointing a nominating committee for the Class A board members. Election to occur this coming November. We have 3 board positions standing for election this fall. Those board members are Charlie Miner, myself, and Michael Tucker. The 2016 nominating committee will be chaired by David Borghese, and I've appointed the following individuals to serve along with him, which are Richard Spear, Beverly Searle, and Barry Barth. If you're interested in serving on the CSA board and wish to be considered for nomination, I would ask that you contact the administrative office. Put your name forward. You'll be asked to fill out a bit of a questionnaire sharing your strengths. You will then be interviewed by the nominating committee in August and September. It is the nominating committee's expectation they'll put a slate of nominees together and put it before us for the October 1st. There will then be you also, by the way, can appear on the ballot by petition. By petition, that petition has to be signed by 50 current and good standing members of CSA and must be submitted by October 1st. There will then be, during the month of October, I don't know the exact date yet, a candidates forum, as we have had in the past, for anyone who has petitioned and those nominated to present themselves to the membership. For your information, there are also a nominating committee for the Class B directors. That committee is chaired by Mark King, and the committee members of the Class B, which are the commercial directors, are Don Sigmund, Bob Gossett, and Bob Sowers. I'd now like to recognize the board members which have left the board as of 2015. Those members were Joe Kernan, Mark Yarborough, and John Trunk. We appreciate the time and commitment that these three made to the board. We wish them well in their future endeavors and appreciate their service to CSA and Sea Pines Plantation. I'd also like to introduce the newly elected board members for 3-year terms which commenced in January of this year. Those Class A directors are David Borghese, Paul Crunkleton, and Barry Barth. Class B commercial directors, Bob Sowers and Bob Gossett. Congratulations to all 5 of you and welcome to the board. Now for committees. The executive committee, which I chair, consists of Michael Tucker, vice chairman, David Borghese, treasurer, Carolyn Adams, secretary, Don Sigmund, appointed at large, and Charles Miner as an ex officio ASPPPO president. For the board for 2016. Class A directors, Dave Borghese. You guys might give a wave. Dave Borghese, Paul Crunkleton, myself, Charles Miner, J.R. Richardson, Beverly Searle, Rich Spear, and Michael Tucker. Class B directors, again, these are the commercial directors, are Mark King, Don Sigmund, Bob Sowers, and Bob Gossett. Sea Pines Resort directors are Carolyn Adams, Steve Birdwell, Carrie Corbett, and Scott Richardson. That's your board for 2016. I'd now like to introduce the chairs of our various standing committees of the board and various task forces. Standing committees, communications is Michael Tucker and his co-chair Barry Barth. The executive committee, which I chair. Finance committee, Dave Borghese. Gate entry is chaired by Carrie Corbett. Governance committee is chaired by Rich Spear. Maintenance enhancement and special project is chaired by J.R. Richardson. Nominating committee, Dave Borghese. Safety and security, chaired by Michael Tucker. And our short-term rental committee, chaired by Beverly Searle and her co-chair, Bill Johnson. On to task force. Public art, Dave Borghese. Legal, which I chair. Joint traffic task force, Paul Crunkleton. Circle to circle representative, Paul Crunkleton. ARB liaison, J.R. Richardson. Communications trolley, Bob Gossett. Marketing trolley, Mark King. Forest Preserve Advisory Board, Ted Allenbach. Governance, Covenants, Rich Spear. Governance Bylaws, Rich Spear. Governance Board Leadership, Rich Spear. Governance Orientation, Rich Spear. And Governance Employee Compensation Benefit, Rich Spear. There's one more Rich Spear. Governance Board Nomination. And then Government Liaison is Scott Richardson. The Greenwood Gate Renovation Task Force is Michael Tucker. And the Six Oaks Advisory Board is David Borghese. So as you can see, there's quite a list of committees and task force looking out for our community. Thanks to all of you for contributing. To conclude, I thought I would review with you the board priorities which were put in place when I joined the board and took over as the chairman in 2015. Let you know what we accomplished out of those objectives and what we are still working on to accomplish, and then what some new objectives are for 2016 that the executive committee put in place at the beginning of this year. The completed objectives was to approve the long-range strategic plan. We did accomplish that. Second was to engage professionals to assist in the development of a resident data management system and survey the residents, determine their appropriateness of and priority for investments incorporated in the long-range strategic plan, and we completed that as well. And lastly, we completed was to develop a strategy to return Six Oaks Cemetery to a sound financial position. And I think if you've reviewed the annual report, you'll see that the Six Oaks Cemetery was profitable in 2016. We spent substantial time looking at what inventory remains in the current phase of the cemetery, what the prospects are for expanding the cemetery. We've done extensive survey work. We've done some revised pricing structures, and I feel confident that we're headed in the right direction. Objectives that we are still underway. Complete a reserve study to determine if we have funds available for further asset enhancement. We had hoped to complete that last year. I'm now anticipating that will be completed in the first half of this year. Evaluate gate functionality and develop a plan to improve property owner gate access. As Michael mentioned, that is an ongoing, difficult challenge. We've got some IT and software initiatives to figure out how to deal with issuing gate passes. We've got traffic issues, and we've got traffic engineers working for us, but we don't yet have the answer, but we are working to that end. Improve conditions and maintenance of our waterways and lagoons. We found that we had much more of a challenge there than we had thought. We put close to $250,000 in this year's operating budget to do a detailed engineering study of all of the waterways and lagoons. RFP for that is out, and I believe early part of third quarter we'll hope to have the results of that RFP, select the engineering firm, and we hope by the end of 2016 we'll have a detailed condition study. Work with the town to improve the Sea-Pine Circle traffic issues and the issues along the corridor reaching from the Sea-Pine Circle to the Sea-Pines Gate. That's an ongoing challenge. The Circle to Circle Committee, which Paul Crunkleton sits on, I'm sure you've read the papers. There's a lot happening there. And I think that their recommendations will be put forward in the next 30 days, and the town council will react to those, I hope, shortly thereafter. In terms of priorities for 16, so those that I just mentioned are things that we had hoped to complete in 15, but have carried over into 16. We've added some new, established a standing communication committee to improve property owner communications. That's a new committee, and one that I'm excited about. Amanda Sutcliffe-Jones is doing a fantastic job, and I hope that you all feel like we're doing a better job getting information out to you. Evaluate all current assessment levels for residents, resort and commercial CSA assessments, and consider methods to increase CSA revenues. As you've heard me mention before, difference between 2015 and 2016 residential assessment was an increase of $2. I think it's a sum total less than $11,000. It's very difficult to keep up with creeping costs on an $10.5 million budget with a $10,000 increase in revenue. We're looking at every single function that we do within the plantation to determine if there's a way we can do it better, more efficient, and at a lower cost. But at the end of the day, we got to figure out how to create more revenue. There's a revenue task force that's been seated. I expect to see the results of that task force be presented to the Finance Committee and the board later this month. And we're putting together a 5-year roll forward in conjunction with the long-range plan to determine if we do at some point come to you to ask you for increased assessments, just exactly what that might be, and make sure that we have gone about it in a very proper way. Work with the Sea Pines Resort to accomplish their requirements to achieve a 5-star status, and work with them on their their enhancements of their resort assets. I think we're making good progress on all these fronts, and I'm looking forward to a successful second half of 2016. These are very exciting and positive times for CSA and our community, and I thank you for allowing me to serve as your chairman and this board to serve you. With that, I will turn the podium over to Victoria. No? David? Brett. Oh, so much. Brett.
You're in charge.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon. I'd like to start off by just introducing you to some members of staff. We've had some staff changeover over the last 6 or 12 to 2 years, and most of you have probably seen these folks at community coffees, but just to make sure, I'd like you to have them stand up, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing in each of those areas. I'd like to start with Toby McSwain. Toby, if you would stand up. Toby came on board, what now, Toby, a little over 3 years ago? Is directing our security operations, our gate operations, our trolley operations, is immensely involved with things like the heritage, as well as with working with our relationships with government, specifically the sheriff, looking at what's happening inside of our gates as well as what's happening outside of our gates, and making sure that we all stay safe, secure, and get around the resort as best as we can. I'd also like to introduce David Henderson. David accepted a position about a little over a year ago. He started off with as being director of special projects, and with that, we had a lot of special projects, so we actually changed his title a little bit, said special projects and operations. And David oversees not only special projects, but things like the community center, Tower Beach, our operations there, the Forest Preserve, and Six Oaks. So he takes all of those affiliated entities and makes them all work for us, and works with the staff of each of those and the community with each of those and each of the related committees and boards. Someone who's relatively new to the staff is Victoria Shanahan. Victoria joined us in the fall. Victoria is our Director of Finance and Administration. She brings to CSA an immense experience level of financial acumen, as well as administrative expertise to help us move forward, and really excited to have Victoria on board to help us plan for the future. Bo Barnett couldn't be here today. He had a family event that he had to attend. Bo joined us back in July as our Director of Maintenance, Enhancements and Major Projects. Bo brings with him a wealth of experience in horticulture and arbor maintenance and other maintenance areas, and we are excited to have Bo on board, and I think many of you have probably seen some of his work around the resort, and we're really excited about the future of our maintenance organization and how we can enhance the community. So those are relatively new people. We also have some people who've been with us for a while, but one more person that's very important, that's new, is Amanda Sutcliffe-Jones. Amanda joined us as our Director of Communications, joined us back in the fall, and has done a tremendous job of getting information out. And we still have a long ways to go, but with Amanda's leadership and working with our committees, we expect to be able to improve our communications and our relations with each owner, and certainly want to make sure that you have an opportunity to communicate to us. Thank you, Amanda. A couple people that couldn't be here, Jeannie Pierce is out. She had back surgery. I'm drastically missing Jeannie. I can't wait for her to get back. And Dave Risk, who's a land use monitor, could not be here today as well. But Dave serves ASPO in checking on those properties and keeps track of what our communications are to each of those properties that need to improve. And then last but not least, Cindy Gray, who is around the corner here, who is our Director of Human Resources. And she's at the table, so if any of you would like to meet Cindy personally, she'll be around at the end of the meeting. So that's our staff. We've got a lot of things going on, a lot of activities, as you heard from the committees and the various task force that we have today. Last year, as Mark mentioned, the Board of Directors adopted the long-range strategic plan. And I'd like to give you a quick update of the 4 key initiatives that were related to the long-range strategic plan. First of which was financial sustainability. One of our primary objectives is to complete a comprehensive reserve study. We have received a reserve. We hired a firm last fall to complete the study. We interviewed 3 firms, selected 2 for final, and then hired 1 to help us with our reserve study. We had drafts delivered to us back at the end of February. We have gone through those, and those are somewhere around 300 pages plus that we had to go through and look at all of the assets, make sure that all the assumptions and the calculations were correct in that reserve study. We sent back and met with the provider, and I guess it was over the weekend we received a revised reserve study based on the feedback that we have. So we're looking forward to reviewing that and then sitting down with the Finance Committee to go through it in detail. Part of that, though, was to get to a point where we could adopt a reserve policy. So we understood what our future cash needs were going to be and when they were going to be needed. And that's the next objective of the Finance Committee as well as staff to get that completed. Once we do that, we're going to be in a much better position to understand those future needs. Presentation for our 2017 business plan and budget. We wanted to revise that. I think if you see our budget today, you see a bunch of spreadsheets, but we wanted to provide some meaning to that. So with Victoria's help, we're really going through and describing the key components of what we're doing on a daily basis in a detailed business plan. And we hope to share that with the community once we get our 2017 budget adopted. So that's in place or in process of being developed. Updating our comprehensive financial policies. We've been doing that for some time now. We still have a couple of those that we really want to address, and the primary one that comes to my mind is how we administer contracts. We spend a good deal of money every year with contractors to provide services, and we want to make sure that we have a very good process to control those contracts and to make sure that we are getting the best deal for all owners. A 5-year business forecast. To include, and Mark mentioned this, prioritize major projects and revenue sources, where the money is going to come from. And then, of course, the stormwater long-range plan. We are going to hire a hydrology company to come in and study our stormwater system so that we can make sure we have the assets in the future to replace that. It's a little different animal with stormwater because we do have fund sources that are not our traditional fund sources, i.e. the town of Hilton Head Island collects a stormwater fee, and we have some rights to those fees to replace assets. Whether or not there's enough funding there to replace all of our assets for the future, we're working through the plan to make sure that we are communicating with the town and working with the town to develop a long-range plan. Our second objective was community-wide partnership and communications outreach. Development and adoption of a comprehensive communication policy. we really didn't have a communication policy. We had a couple of policies that related to communication, but things like what should go on the website, what should we be discussing with people, how are we collecting that information, what kinds of tools should be using to open up our communications process. With Amanda on board, we have drafted a communications policy that has been presented to the board, and we hope to get that policy adopted at the next board meeting. Website planning, development, and implementation of a new cpinesliving.com. This is an area that I saw when I first came on board. It didn't rise to the top of the priorities, mainly because we didn't know exactly what we wanted to communicate. Now that we can get an adoption of a communication plan, we want that website to reflect that. And we'll be working with providers and sending out requests for proposals, as well as with an IT strategy group that will help us develop this website going forward. Continuing on with that, last year we conducted a survey, completed that survey in October, and many of you have probably seen some of the response information that we provided at one of our events at the community center. We had 35.2% of the people that were solicited responded. 2,472 surveys returned. Of that, we saw a good split of primary residents, people who decided that this was their primary residence and listed Sea Pines as their primary residence. 45% said it was their secondary residence. 20% said their primary interest was in rental. Another part was investment. You'll add all those up and you'll see that we're over 100% because many people we found use their property for multiple purposes. They may list this as their primary residence, but some months of the year they go out, they leave, probably in the summer, and they rent their property as well. So that information we now know and what the purposes of those properties are and what people do with their property. So it was a great eye-opener for us to help us make decisions in the future, as well as to collect the data on this so that we better know how to communicate to each of our owners. Also was to develop the quality of the Sea Pines lifestyle. Continue to develop and complete a comprehensive plan for future implementation of the proposed strategic initiatives. We had 4 major initiatives that we asked what were the priorities of in our survey. And it came back very strong that the Greenwood Gate improvements in moving traffic in and out, as well as the aesthetic experience, as well as your service experience that you received at the Greenwood Gate was very important or extremely important in your response. Landscape and maintenance improvements came at 62.1%, very important or extremely important. Forest Preserve infrastructure improvements was 33%, and the community center improvements, or creating a central site for activities, came in at 29.2%. So it's clear that we have a mission to do with Greenwood Gate, as well as our landscaping, our corridors, how the Sea Pines looks, and we are actively working on several initiatives, and you heard about them with some of the reports that you had earlier on traffic, gate entrance, and landscaping, and how we can improve that and match some of the things that the resort has done on landscaping and facilities so that the complete experience for all owners, all guests who come to Sea Pines is consistent and excellent. The last objective that we had was trusted governance. Provide a plan to be developed and approved for a leadership academy to help develop volunteers interested in leadership positions. The resources that are in this room and in this community are immense. You can see that we're tapping into those already, but before we put people in and ask them to make decisions, we wanted to provide a resource for owners to really understand the different things that we do. And that is part of what we're going to do with the Leadership Academy to help us educate as well as inform, as well as get feedback from our owners about the different things that we do and how we do them. Whoops, go back. Provide a plan to prepare for the development of a resource to provide comprehensive library of the governing documents at Sea Pines. when I first got here, I realized very quickly that we have a pretty antiquated system. We have a lot of files, we have a lot of paper, and it's strewn about in many different areas. And we don't have an organized or central repository of all of that information. And to serve not only this generation and the folks that are in this room, but the future, we felt it very necessary to make sure that we move forward and document all of that digitally so that it can be easily researched and searched. And that's another initiative that we are moving forward with. With that update on the major projects that we have going on, again, we'll be here for questions and answers at the end. But with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Dave Borghese to give a financial overview. Dave?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a wonderful day in paradise again. Is everyone's eyes open yet? Okay. I'd first like to start by thanking the Finance Committee members. The 2015 Finance Committee members are listed on page 7 of the annual report. I'd also like to personally thank Neil Fennell and Jeff Harriman. Their term limits have expired and they will be coming off the board. And then I would also like to introduce and welcome 2 new members to the Finance Committee, Marianne Bastnagel and John Fahrenkopf. The CSA 2015 and 14 financial statements have been audited by the accounting firm of Elliott, Davis, and DiCasimo. The auditor's opinion is the same as has been in prior years, essentially a clean report, and copies of the audited financial statements are available upon request. I believe the essence of what you really need to know about CSA finances is really contained in the 2015 CSA annual report starting on page 8. The financial section of the annual report includes comparative financial statements, that is balance sheets, income statements, and cash flows. And there's also a discussion and analysis of changes year over year. The report also includes commentary on the 2016 budgeted revenues and expenses compared to 2015 budget and 2015 actual. And this year we also included some information on projected cash flows. So I hope you'll find the report to be informative, transparent, and we're not going to go through all the numbers. But I will have a few brief comments on the content of the report. So if we could get to slide 1, my first slide. This particular financial summary is actually incorporated into the text of the annual report. And the red line up here may be very difficult to see as I now see it. It's our net current assets. That is our current assets less our current liabilities. You'll also see that we've shown investments in cash would tend to flip around. But the importance of the top line right here shows that over the last 3 years, we've been fairly steady at a slightly more than $9 million of net current assets. And to me, this is a critical financial criteria for any POA. It really depicts our financial strength and liquidity, as well as our flexibility. And at 85% of 2016 budgeted revenues demonstrate that Sea Pines community is currently well-positioned in both those attributes. However, managing future expenditures within our ability to generate sufficient revenues is a challenge that we will face going forward. Similar to last year's presentation, what I'd like to do is also go through the status of our investments maintained at our broker and custodian, Morgan Stanley. Next slide, please. What I've depicted here is really, we have 2 accounts with them, an operating account and a designated account. And the designated account is by far the largest, which is $8.2 million of the $9.2 million of total investments stated at fair market value. You can see from the pie chart there's essentially 4 types of investment assets. And you can see that it's made up of cash, fairly small portion, certificates of deposit, municipal bonds, and the largest being corporate fixed income securities at 81% of the total. These are essentially high credit quality fixed income securities, but they are not risk-free. Next slide, please. Again, fair market value, this pie chart demonstrates the components of the fair market value of this account. Cash and accrued interest is approximately 2% of the total. The par value of the securities, that is the amount we would receive upon maturity, is about 94%, and there is something we call a premium at 4%. The premium arises from the acquisition costs in excess of par value, which is caused by the fact that we buy investments in the secondary market, and it has a fixed coupon rate. To the extent that the fixed coupon rate, which is the interest we receive on a semi-annual basis, is greater than the current market value for interest for that financial instrument, you have to pay a premium to get it. And that premium goes away over time, but we receive a greater than market value interest rate to make up for that over time. So essentially, that premium will adjust as you go forward. Over time, it generally will decrease as you get closer to maturity date. Next slide, please. Finally, this slide is a bar graph that depicts the laddering of the investments at fair market value by the year of maturity. We continue to maintain an 8-year ladder, and note that we have already, for 2016, we've already bought some securities and we already had some of them mature. But you can see that what we're trying to accomplish is basically a laddering of approximately $1 million a year coming due, and we're starting now to look at maturities, investments that would mature in 2023. At this point, I'd like to welcome Victoria Shanahan to the podium, and she will cover some of the more current 2016 financial information. And as I've joked with her, she's the one who will answer all your questions.
Good afternoon. I'm Victoria Shanahan. I know you're expecting a pocket protector and a bow tie and wingtips, but that's just not who I am. So I thought it was important to speak to you all briefly so you get to know my face, I get to know your face, then talk about where we are in 2016. We've already had our first quarter go by, and this is our balance sheet, and I had it in comparison to where we are last year. The one thing I did want you to notice, what's not on this balance sheet, and that is debt. CSA has 0 debt. Now, we have the ability to borrow, but so far we are in a great financial position that we have not had to go into those lines of credit. The equity section, which is down at the bottom, your fund balance, your designated, is fairly steady. You'll notice that it's in 3 categories. Basically, you have your reserves, then we've established an emergency fund in the event of a natural disaster. We do have funds set aside and available for us. And finally, we have specific operational, which has to do with the trolley and the dredging portion. Next slide. And this is where we are for the first quarter of 2016. Compared to our budget. You'll see that we are down a little bit compared to budget, and most of that has to do with our annual decal sales are down simply because they really weren't available until the middle of February. On our operating expenditures, it looks like we are making all these savings and all these great moves. Unfortunately, there's 2 reasons why we are under budget. One is because we are significantly understaffed and we budget at full staff. And also some of those major repairs and replacements, those projects that we had initially wanted to implement during the first quarter have not yet been implemented. So it's just more of a timing issue than an actual cost savings. And then the other income looks good. We do not budget for any unrealized gain or loss. That's why you see a 0 in the change in market value of investments. Okay. So I want to keep it brief because I know everybody's ready to eat and ready to have cocktail. So let me give it to Mark.
Okay. Victoria, David, Brett, great reports. Thank you all. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn, and we will then move to questions. May I have a motion? Second? Anyone object? We're adjourned. On Q&A, we're going to turn this over to Brett. We had asked the community to put forward questions in advance, and we did this a year ago. A year ago, we only had 4 or 5 questions in advance. I guess Amanda's doing such a great job with communications. We had about 20 or so questions. We're going to put those questions on the website and their answers, rather than stand up here and read questions and give you answers. We thought it would be more effective to put those on the website and ask that you that are here who might have questions, put those forward. So you'll ultimately get to see and review the questions in advance, but we wanted to move this along. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. A couple of things just real quick. We are recording. We have microphones here, and we will be posting the minutes, the video of the minutes on the website. We also, as Mark mentioned, had several questions that came in advance of the meeting, and we have a good start on the answers of those. A couple of them are pretty technical, so we're going to need some additional assistance to get some specific answers ready, but we hope to have that posted this week, as well as any questions that come up here. And for those of you who either don't get up to the podium, up to the microphones for a time perspective, or simply choose not to, but still have questions based on the information that's provided, please email us at info@CSAC-Pines, or Brett M. at CSAC-Pines, or Amanda J. at CSAC-Pines, or phone us and leave us a message or get us on the phone. So we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to get the questions in. But with that, again, we are recording, so I ask that you do, with your questions, come to the microphone, give us your name and your address, and then let us know your question. So anybody can come to the microphones at this point, and happy to entertain those questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Kate Keep. I've lived at 9 West Willow Oak Road for 30 years. I have 2 questions, wondering if you could address specifically what the issues are with the covenants that you've spent $104,000 in legal funds on. And secondly, that survey that you took indicates a great deal of concern about the Greenwood Sea-Pines Circle congestion. The USCB campus on Office Park Road is going to have a major impact on Office Park Road and Greenwood Drive, and I would like to have you, both organizations, address specifically what actions you've taken to mitigate those, or to see that the USCB's campus was placed elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me start with the answer to traffic. Paul Crunkleton is here. He has been working, prior to Paul, Joe Kernan was working actively with the town on a list of traffic issues. I started working for CSA on town traffic related issues before I came to work for CSA while I was at the town. So we've been working on this for some time. The Circle to Circle Committee is also working on these issues. We are looking at alternatives, but most importantly, we made sure that an area-wide traffic study was established last year, which had not been done in the past, for the entire Circle to Circle corridor. The town council has then also requested and completed the Circle to Circle Committee, established that, and they have been working now for over a year as well on all of these issues. Measurements were taken last June on the progress of the circle, and we know that the Sea-Pine Circle has failed. We've been working with the town on USCB on a variety of issues, as well as different ways that we can mitigate traffic. One of our key issues is the forecast that is coming out now on what will happen or may happen in that corridor and the impacts it may have on traffic for the future. And the numbers are pretty bleak, I must say. So we think we need to get some solutions that are out of the box, and we are working to try to do that, both for CSA and gate entry, as I mentioned earlier, as well as with the town, with what we may need to do at the Greenwood Corridor, the Office Park intersection, Sea Pine Circle, as well as all of the other circle-to-circle topics that incorporate the area from the bridge to the Coligny Circle and then out onto 278. With that, on this other question about the legal fees, I think I will turn it over to Rich. I think it's specifically to the dollar amount that was spent on legal fees from ASPO. Is that correct, ma'am?
With respect to legal fees, first of all of you have used lawyers. They don't donate services, and their fees are competitive for the market. But in terms of the issues that were being addressed, I think you have to go back and look at the fact we have 1,100 pages of covenants that go back to the 70s. Some were very well drafted by councils at various times. Some were drafted on the back of envelopes. And in that process, we felt it was important, or Charlie Biner as president and the board, I think, agreed with him, did agree with him, that he needed to understand exactly what those covenants were that were in contention. And for a number of years, there's been covenants that various parties would refer to as being this, that, or the other. So Charlie felt it was important to seek outside counsel, and he did on several different covenant issues to understand ASPO's perspective on those covenants. That part, if you will, for a second, is slightly separate from, as we entered into conversations with the resort, we're normally talking about people, good men, good people, good faith, looking at things with different perspectives. And that's exactly what I think has happened here. The resort has been nothing but a good citizen in terms of the improvements we all have seen. They've been nothing but cooperative in this process that we're going through with them. They have a different opinion on some things than we do, and we're trying to work that through with the resort. But underlying that is an intent from my perspective, I don't mean to speak for the resort, they have invested significantly and plan to invest significantly more. And all of that will affect and help our real estate values. And in doing all those conversations, we just want to make sure that it isn't done in a balanced way that protects and deals with the rights that we have under our covenants. It would not be appropriate for me to talk here, or for Charlie if he was here, about what those specific differences of opinion are. That's what we're working through right now. That's the conversations we have going on with the resort, and they have been very productive. And I pointed out earlier, it's pretty important. There are 2 or 3 core issues in which there's some differences of opinion, but there's a whole lot of issues in which there's some pretty, I don't mean to speak for the resort, but which there is not significant differences of opinion. But it's an entire package that we're looking at, and that takes some time. And in doing that, we have to have legal representation to do it. That's what we're here for. But the covenants were written back in 1970. Some people interpret it as saying one thing, and some people see it as saying something else. And that's where good people can disagree, and we're working through that. We've taken this much time because we're working through this in a collegiate fashion with the resort, and hope that that's how it will turn out. I don't know if I answered your question specifically enough, but it wasn't a single legal opinion. It was a series of opinions about different covenants, ranging from 4 or 5 that were identified when we started the process with the negotiation with the resort. You may recall that we sought opinions from all the different groups, and they piled a whole bunch of, I'm looking for Mark, who's the other committee person. They piled about 20 or 30 different things on the table that they thought were relevant. So we sorted through those with the resort as things that we thought were meaningful, things that we weren't, and ended up with a group of things we've been dealing with, the vast majority of which I think we have agreement on. But the agreement still hinges on getting everything agreed to. It's a package that we're looking at. So, and many of those are things that will materially improve CSA's ability to operate and ASPO's ability to make sure properties are maintained, to make sure a number of different other issues that were concerns to property owners were addressed. And the only way that can be done is through a referendum. For for these covenants to be modified. And that takes the collaboration of both the resort and ASPO to do that. To all of this process, to assign, CSA itself is to the side. This is an ASPO resort conversation because we're talking about the rights of property owners, residential property owners. It's not remember, ASPO represents all the groups, individuals, commercial, and resort interests. CSA, I'm sorry, what did I say? ASPO, I'm sorry, CSA, as well as the residential owners. So I don't know if I answered your question long-winded or short fashion. Oh, yeah, well, sorry. And of course, you can't have one lawyer look at it. You want to make sure you're right. So we've had 2 lawyers look at it. Because it's that significant. If we reach agreement on these things, these permanently put to bed issues have been bouncing around for a long time. And they need, for everybody here, they need to stop bouncing around. There needs to be clarity. It's one thing for us to create a compendium of covenants. It's another thing to go in and fix the things that need to get fixed in the covenants that there's differences on. And we need to do that. Because right now we're encumbered. When you sign your property thing, you're signing up for all the covenants. But you haven't read 1,100 pages of covenants. And that can create a lot of frustration as we go forward. There's lots of nuances in there. I thought it was pretty straightforward. I see Carl Becker sitting back there. First thing he did is say, you don't understand how complex this is. Somebody said, rewrite the CSA bylaws and rewrite the covenants. Let's do the rewrite the covenants. And I think you convinced us, Carl. You got back there. Raise your hand there, Carl. Carl has been a yeoman's job on helping us understand the issues associated with it. And his rates were exactly 0, right? Same rate we get paid for the board. And I'm sorry for giving you a long-winded answer, and if it sounds like I'm dancing, talk to me afterwards. I'm really not trying to, but it's a complex process. We're working through it. The resort has been very cooperative with us in the process. This is not we don't want this to become an adversarial process, and so far I think we're working our way through it. Thank you. Next. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'd like to ask what we can do as residents and owners in Sea Pines that will have the greatest impact on locating that campus elsewhere and taking care of our traffic problem. What can we do to have the greatest impact?
Well, right now, it's getting to that circle to circle and to town council. Town council is going to move forward on that USCB campus. All indications are moving that way. And if that doesn't happen, something else will be happening in that space. And we need a traffic solution. And we are, again, acting and working with the town on that. But attend those meetings. Circle to Circle is meeting right now from 8:30 to, most of those meetings are going about 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours every Wednesday morning, and be a participant. We have many residents who are participating in those meetings and voicing it, and we're moving the ball to different areas and making sure that things are being recognized and considered. After that, the recommendations from the Circle to Circle will be going to town council, and weighing in on those considerations with town council is critical. Seek out Tom Lennox and give him your input on what needs to happen. Tom has his email address on the town website, and you can let him know what you think. That's your representation, and you should exercise that.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the both boards for working so diligently and free, even though some may be a lawyer on there. But what I'd like to say is a couple of things. Number one is C2C meets every Wednesday, and I have rarely seen many participants from Sea Pines being there, and I think we need to get there. I try to make every meeting. A bunch of new issues are coming up, not regarding traffic, but regarding a village view for the Coligny area, creating a village, okay? Has nothing to do with the traffic. Considering bicycle paths on Pope Avenue, okay? Considering additional parking in Coligny. You make more parking, you attract more cars. Okay, so you folks got to get out there. Approximately June 2nd, I believe there will be a forum held here for the Sea Pines residents. It would be a shame if we did not have a 90% attendance. It's probably most of your only chance to know what's going on. But I encourage you on Wednesday morning, 8:30, at the town hall to appear. Now, I had a couple of questions, and they are, one, what is the annual cost for Mr. Fisk? I noticed we only had a percentage, and I'd like to know what it cost for him, the full package. Risk, sorry. Never got it right. Okay. And also there appears to be an issue with the owner of South Beach and his proportion or appropriate proportion of payment of his assessments. I understand this has been going on for a while. Are we addressing that issue? And I think that that's one that will add to the bottom line of our CSA money. So I think that those are kind of important issues for us to be looking at. Attendance, costs of individuals, and also the appearance, the situation at South Beach, which many people probably are not aware of. So I just want to leave it at that, but to remember that, and I'm sure that our communication people will get out the idea that on 6/2, I believe the date has been chosen, that there will be a C-to-C meeting, and get that out. The other issue would be to send out something for our folks here to say whether or not they are for or against the USCB campus, which is a absolute disaster, and the current situation for the building on Office Park Road is for apartments. The ones that are over the jewelry store, the hairdresser, etc. They're putting in a petition for 2 or 3 bedroom apartments. So look at the continued population. Thank you.
Thank you. And some of the questions we will have on the website, some of the detail of the amount that is being spent currently for the land use monitor. We can get some more information about that on there. I don't have the total in the top of my head. Well, there's other costs that are related to that. But it is, that position is a part-time position. Dave Risk works about 24 to 30 hours a week, every week, and driving through the community and identifying these or working on reports of deficiencies in properties and going to follow up on all of those and send out information on them. Other questions? We will also get the date of the forum for the Circle to Circle that will be held at the community center and the time of that, and we'll send that out via email, and it'll be posted on the website as well.
Did you need me to help you?
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. I have done this before, but publicly I would like to acknowledge personal relationships and services that have been provided by your staff. First of all, orchids to you, because you have a platter full, as I have said before. And also, Mr. McSwain is one that you need to actually compliment, because I have had personal dealings with security, and it has been very, very professional and very self-serving. Thank you. Thank you for all the orchids. Not onions, but orchids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. May. Other questions? Again, let us know if you still have some. You don't want to quite step up and ask, let us know. And with that, I will open it up for refreshments in the room next to us. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.